Welcome to the show. We just watched episode 4 of X-Men 97. Now, this episode was definitely different from the rest of the episodes, the previous 3. This one felt more like a filler episode, especially when it came to Sunspot and Jubilee going against Mojo, which was like, it was pretty crazy in itself, but it was like, okay, I get it. I see where we're going with this, but it didn't really go anywhere. All it really did was bring it brought Jubilee and Sunspot closer to each other, and they kissed at the end of the episode. Okay, that's cool. But then we got to see what was going on with Forge and Storm, and kind of like you were saying, this episode was more centric on them because that was more of the main storyline. So, what did you think about this episode?
Oh, I'm disappointed, but I get it. It was definitely a filler episode. So I mean, right from the get-go, when they showed what they're calling the Motendo, I don't know if you caught it. It had an X-Men game cartridge in it. So so the Motendo, it looks exactly like the Sega Genesis from the early 90s. If you ever had a Sega Genesis in the early 90s, that's exactly what they looked like, controller and everything. And the game is actually a real game. I actually had that game. The first X-Men game came out in 93, and then they did a second one in 95 called X-Men 2 Clone Wars. The game they showed briefly in there, that's not how the original game played, but I thought it was a nice callback to some of those things from the 90s that were X-Men related. Now, it definitely filler because the whole video game aspect of that story for Jubilee, obviously it brought the two of them close together, but it was definitely focused on Jubilee because if the episode started off where it's her birthday, 18th birthday. They're still, as we heard them, especially Magneto, they're treating her still like a child. And she obviously hears that, overhears it, and now you can see that resentment coming out of her because she kept, I don't want to call it complaining, but she was upset that they were still treating her like a child, and she even called Magneto a helmet head, right? So she's not happy about that aspect. And then we got right into this whole video game world for her. Then we see this character. We're not too sure who the character is, but then by the end of it, we find out it's an older version of Jubilee, who has now in this particular space developed her power stronger than what the younger one has, because she even made a reference like, oh, I can do that. So yeah, I mean that took up the first half of the episode. Again, when we were watching all that, I was like, where is this even going? This has, again, nothing to do with the first 3 episodes. Nowhere did we even touch on anything like this. Then the last 11 12 minutes focused on Forge and Storm, which we were hoping to see, and I was hoping to see the whole episode like that. I think how they ended it was kind of weird. It's almost that either she's in a dream state, hallucinating, something has happened where this owl she referenced to seeing a couple times is now turned into this monster demonic owl that's now attacked Forge. It's attacking her, and then we get cutscene, right? But we obviously see that, as we mentioned in the pre-show, the story of Forge and Storm, and from the comics, they actually had a romantic relationship. We know he developed the actual weapon that was used on her, which was intended for Magneto. She lost her powers, and now she's finding out in this universe of the show that he designed those collars that are used on mutants to take away their powers when they're captured, arrested, which she obviously wasn't happy about that. And he jumps right into, hey, not do you want to go for coffee? It's, hey, I love you.
I love you. And what it looks like,
he drops the big L word.
I was like, man, what are you doing, dude? Calm down. I know it's an animated series, so they're going to move a little fast, but I was like, dude, just chill out. We're not there yet. But I think what we're looking at is, I think these are the Dire Wraiths who are coming after him because they want that the neutralizer. And plus, like, I think it's a way, if I remember correctly, I think it's like they wanted to get it because they wanted to use it, as a form of power in order to, like, disable those who might want to stop them. So I think that's what we're going for here. I mean, obviously, he put her in that machine to bring her powers back. It didn't quite work, but I think that when she's put in a position where it's either life or death, I think that's when her powers are going to reemerge.
Yeah.
So,
And it might be where she's got to be pushed to that point,
yeah,
right? Where she's got to be put in a situation where either she's going to die, one of the X-Men is going to die, and all of a sudden her powers come back and she's able to use them to save the day or save whoever in that episode. But yeah, definitely completely different than what we saw in the first three.
yeah,
And this
definitely.
and I know, and if I recall correctly, the next episode 5 that we'll get next week is not may not be a continuation of where we left off. That won't happen until
Well, but
episode 6.
but this was called part one. You would think
Well,
this part two
well,
would
you would think
be.
that, but when you go look at the title references for these episodes, part 2 isn't until episode 6.
Oh wow.
So it's as if they're gonna shift the. I don't know if they're gonna shift the story back to the X-Men crew. What's
Mhm.
going on with them now? With the new Jean, the baby's not there, Bishop's gone, and we're gonna see what's happening there, and then we're gonna switch then right back to part 2 for this story.
Well,
But yeah,
the thing I like so much about the show so far is that like the way they introduce the villains and they introduce the stories, it's just like you're watching a live action comic. Like if I'm reading the comics, that's how they would introduce the next villain. Just like boom, you know what I mean? Like in your face, hella big,
yeah,
grabbing her. It's like yeah, this is cool. I like this shit. Now, granted, if you did it in live action, I don't think it would come across as smooth. But it's animated series, so I like that. And also too, like I thought it was cool to see Mojo again. I had a feeling it was Mojo, especially like when those things those cables came out and grabbed them. I was like,
mhm.
dude, this might be Mojo, and then let alone it was. And then he was skinny, and then he was like, blah, and he was like fat
Yeah,
again. Like
yeah.
he
The
was just kind of
Mojo
sucking it
character,
in.
yeah, the Mojo character, I think would be very hard to pull off live action. I mean, if you're gonna bring that a character like that, I mean, this is the way to do it, animated. I mean, that way you get the full comic effect, and you don't have to worry about the CGI looks really bad on this. We shouldn't do this at all. I mean, you don't have to worry about
Yeah,
that with animated. But I mean, yeah, I mean, they definitely, I guess, kind of updated. I mean, they used the video game reference here. I know the Mojo character previously was kind of more when it was originally developed around like network executives for like television. And as they even mentioned, I think the Mojo character mentioned, "Oh, the video games is the new thing now. It's the future." So they were definitely playing on like today's references, video games versus like old TV shows. So
hmm
that was a good reference. But yeah, I thought, I mean, it was good to see another character we haven't seen really much before, animated, or definitely not live. So it was good to see that character
yeah.
brought into the fold. So
And then the plot twist too that it was the older Jubilee because
yep,
she was a like a construct of the game that they had made to
keep
play the
playing the
game.
levels over and over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like she was the last one who survived.
Hmm.
That was pretty cool, but definitely a big shift from the first three episodes. And
Yeah.
anytime you have a series, I think you're bound to get one of these. Um, you
You
know,
can get away with one. You can get away with one, but if we see ourselves having another, maybe one or two more of these, with especially with only 6 episodes left, I think we
yeah.
might have a problem.
Yeah, I hope this is the only filler episode. Obviously, like the Mojo aspect of the episode was clearly just filler, but it did serve a purpose in that it brought Jubilee and Sunspot closer together, and now they're essentially in a relationship now. They're kissing each other and all that at the end of the episode. So I mean that served its purpose in that.
But
But again,
I think that could have been done though without it being a filler episode. I
oh,
think they
absolutely,
could have
absolutely.
easily kind of worked that in to the story we've seen thus
hmm
far in 3 and a third of an episode.
Well,
A third being the Forge and Storm piece we just saw. I think they could have easily
right.
folded that building a tight relationship. Are they going to be in a relationship together without going down this path of we're going to spend half an episode strictly on these two characters in this setting that has really nothing to do with the first two. And then maybe it was just their way of bringing Mojo in, right? Maybe that was just this was their unique way of bringing that character in. So I
I
mean,
mean, lots of fireworks in this episode.
yeah,
you
literally,
know, literally. Although I did like the animation style where it had their animation over like the 8-bit
Yep. Yeah,
sprite
that was pretty
animation
cool.
of video games. That was pretty cool. So they did some really cool things with that, kind of mixing animation styles. But in the end, probably the weakest episode of the series.
Yep,
But I mean,
definitely. Yep.
this being an animated series, I didn't predict that it would even be as good as it had been in the first 3 episodes. So I think definitely they'll bounce back next week with a much stronger episode. I mean, we didn't even see the X-Men. All we saw, I mean, we saw Jubilee obviously and
Yeah, that
Sunspot,
was
and then you saw Storm and
Storm.
Forge,
That was
and
it.
that was really it. You didn't
Yeah.
see anybody else. And
Well, I mean, at the very beginning when they're around the table, with the first 2 minutes before,
yeah,
but
that's
that,
true.
yeah,
That's
but
true.
that was it.
That was brief.
Yeah, it was very brief. But again, I think with every TV show, live, animated, to your point that you called out earlier, we've already discussed. I think there's always going to be at least one filler episode. This was it. They played that card early on episode 4. They got 6 more to go. So let's hope these next 6 they can really, bring their A game and start not wrapping up the story, but they're going to need to start coming to that point where we're going to get to, okay, what's going to be the end result here? Because again, those last 3 episodes are supposed to play out. They play out as one titled episode. So I'm wondering at episode 7 if it's going to be to be continued, or sorry, episode 8, and then episode 9 to be continued. Where it's just, again, it's going to pick right up where it left off. So,
well,
yeah.
you think about it too. I mean, like when you look at the remaining episodes, right? The next one is called Remember It. It has, and I'm not gonna read the whole synopsis, but it has to deal with the whole Geonosia being part of the being accepted into the UN. So definitely you're gonna get more of the X-Men team interacting in this episode. More of Magneto as well, and then episode 6 is called Life and Death Part 2. So this is going to pick up where this last episode left off with Storm and Forge. And then after that, it goes to another episode called Bright Eyes, and then you have Tolerance is Extinction Part 1, and then Part 2 is episode 9, and Part 3 is episode 10. So really, I think this was the only filler episode that they kind of put in there. And now we're gonna get just straight up, just more deeper story with the remaining episodes. Which,
and they're gonna have to do something with this for the story that they've already put out there for this first part of this episode, because you can't have this and then they don't call back to this potential relationship, using Jubilee as the primary focus, but. We'll see. We'll
see how it's handled. But overall, though, I mean, I did like, and I'm still a huge fan of the series. I like the episode. Definitely the weakest episode of the whole series so far. But I think after this, it's going to pick up right back up again. And it's going to be really good next week as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
But overall, a little bit of a letdown. But every show has to have an episode where it's just dedicated to developing characters, and I think that's what they did with this episode. They further developed Jubilee and Sunspot, and they developed the story of what Storm is going through right now. I think that if they would have done the Geonosia prepares to join the UN in this episode along with Storm, it might have been too much to too much shit would have been happening. So this kind of broke things up. So the next episode will focus more squarely on the X-Men as a team, dealing with that, dealing with Geonosia and the UN, and then going back to Storm in the following episode. So I kind of like what they did here.
Yeah.
And like I said, it really feels like I'm watching like a live, not live action, but like an animated comic book, and so I really like the pacing, and I like the storytelling and the way they're introducing characters. I think it's really well done.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you just said. Looking at the titles, Bright Eyes being, I think, was 7.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that has any play to, because right before that episode, we see part 2 of the Forge and Storm story bit that we just saw part 1 of. So I'm wondering if Bright Eyes has a reference to Storm, like her eyes like lighting up with like lightning or something, and we see her powers come back then, and then she plays a pivotal role in the last 3 episodes, which is part 1, 2, and 3. So we'll see, but I mean, this episode doesn't deter me from the show, but it definitely wasn't what I expected for episode 4. But I mean, again,
but we'll see.
we'll see how it plays out.
We'll see how it plays out. Guys, I want to thank everyone who came out here tonight. I want to thank Sean for joining me once again for another episode of X-Men 97. Guys, we have 94 people watching this stream. Was it 88 are watching on X? If you're watching on X, make sure that you follow me on X, because we're gonna be doing this every single week. So follow my account on X. Follow Sean, who's Nerd Cosa Nostra, on X as well. That way you're always staying up to date with the latest episodes of X-Men 97. Follow me on Twitch and follow me on YouTube as well. Sean, we'll do it again next week.
Absolutely, my friend. Can't wait.
All right, guys. We will see you guys next time. Go watch X-Men 97. It's badass. We'll see you guys next time.